the heart of a child. Later that night, Ifeoma and Ikin sat with Amora to discuss what had happened. Uju sat across from them, trying to hide her smirk. But something was different about that night. Ikin had seen the guilt in his daughter's eyes earlier and knew something wasn't right. Uju, he said sternly, do you know anything about the stolen supplies? Uju froze, her smirk disappearing. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she stammered. Ikin's face darkened. So, it was you? You set Chidinma up. Ifeoma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. Uju, how could you? Uju burst into tears. I'm sorry. I just didn't want her to take my place in the family. Though Uju's actions had hurt her deeply, Chidinma looked at Uju with compassion. I forgive you, she said softly. Uju looked up, her eyes red from crying. You forgive me? After everything I've done? Chidinma nodded. We are family now. And families forgive. Ikin and Ifeoma exchanged a glance, pride swelling in their hearts. Chidinma is right, Ikin said. We are family. And from now on, we will treat each other with kindness and respect. Uju wiped her tears and hugged Chidinma. Though it would take time to fully heal, that night marked the beginning of a new understanding between them. After that night, the tension in the house seemed to lift. Uju, although still feeling guilty for what she had done, tried her best to make amends. She offered to help Chidinma with her schoolwork, and though it was awkward at first, the two girls slowly began to bond. Chidinma, always forgiving and kind-hearted, accepted Uju's help. She was happy to have someone to study with, even if it was the same person who had hurt her before. Maybe we could be real sisters one day, Chidinma thought to herself. Meanwhile, Amora noticed the changes in the house. Uju was more polite, Ifeoma was as kind as ever, and even Ikin had a lighter step when he came home from work. For the first time in a long time, Amora felt like things were finally falling into place. But as peaceful as things seemed, Amora couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was a quiet whisper in the back of her mind, growing louder with each passing day. She had noticed John, the family's longtime driver, lurking around the house more than usual, always with a sly grin on his face. One afternoon, as Amora was tending to the garden, John approached her with a knowing smirk. Amora, you've done well for yourself, haven't you? He said casually, leaning against the fence. Amora frowned. I'm just doing my job, John. John chuckled darkly. Oh, I know. But how long do you think this will last? People like you don't stay in houses like this for long. Sooner or later, the truth will come out. Amora felt a chill run down her spine. What are you talking about? He shrugged, his eyes gleaming with malice. Let's just say I know things. Secrets about people. About you. With that, he walked away, leaving Amora standing there, shaken and confused. That evening, Amora couldn't stop thinking about John's words. What could he possibly know about her? She had been honest and hardworking her whole life. But then, her thoughts drifted back to something she had tried to forget. Years ago, before Chidinma was born, Amora had been involved with a man named Obinna, a wealthy businessman who had promised her the world. But when Amora discovered she was pregnant, Obinna vanished, leaving her to raise Chidinma on her own. She had never told anyone about him, not even Chidinma. But John's cryptic words made her wonder if he somehow knew the truth. That night, as Amora lay awake in bed, she made a decision. If John really knew something about her past, she had to confront him. She couldn't let anyone threaten the new life she had built for herself and her daughter. The next morning, Amora caught John alone near the garage. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she was determined to get answers. John, what did you mean yesterday? She demanded, her voice trembling slightly. John turned to face her, a sly grin creeping onto his face. I see you're curious now. You want to know what I know? Amora nodded, her fist clenched at her sides. If you know something, just say it. John stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know who Chidima's father is. And I know that you've kept it a secret from everyone, including her. Amora's heart nearly stopped. How do you know that? John smirked. I've been around, Amora. I've seen things. Heard things. It's a small world. Obina's a powerful man, and he's still out there, living his life as if you and Chidima never existed. Amora felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had worked so hard to keep the past buried, to protect Chidima from the pain of knowing her father had abandoned them. What do you want? She whispered, knowing that John wasn't telling her this out of the kindness of his heart. John's grin widened. Let's just say, I could be persuaded to keep quiet about this. But it's going to cost you. Amora's stomach churned. You want money? He nodded. Not a lot. Just enough to make it worth my while. Amora's mind raced. She had saved up a little money from working with Ikin and Ifeoma, but it wasn't much. She could give John what he wanted, but how long would it keep him quiet? And what if he demanded more later? That night, Amora sat alone, staring at the small stash of money she had hidden under her bed. She knew she couldn't give in to John's blackmail, but she also couldn't risk him revealing the truth about Obina to Chidima or the family. Ifeoma and Ikin had been so kind to her, what would they think if they knew she had hidden such a secret? Amora realized she needed a plan. But first, she needed to confide in someone. The next day, Amora decided to do something she had never done before. She knocked on Ifeoma's door, her hands trembling slightly. Come in, Ifeoma's warm voice called from inside. Amora stepped into the room, her heart pounding. Ma, I need to tell you something. Ifeoma looked up from her desk, concern immediately crossing her face. What is it, Amora? Amora hesitated, unsure of how to begin. It's about Chidinma and her father. Ifeoma's brow furrowed. Go on. Amora took a deep breath. Chidinma's father, he was a man named Obina. He left me when I told him I was pregnant, and I've been raising her on my own ever since. I never told anyone because I didn't want Chidinma to know that her father abandoned her. Ifeoma's eyes softened with understanding. Oh, Amora. You've been carrying this burden alone for so long. Amora nodded, tears welling in her eyes. But now? John knows. He's threatening to tell everyone unless I pay him to keep quiet. Ifeoma's expression darkened. John has no right to blackmail you. We won't let him get away with this. Ifeoma and Amora spent the next few days coming up with a plan. Ifeoma knew they couldn't give in to John's demands, but they needed to find a way to stop him before he could cause any more damage. Meanwhile, Ikin had noticed that something was wrong. Is everything alright? He asked Ifeoma one evening. Ifeoma hesitated, but then decided to tell him the truth. Ikin, there's something you need to know about Amora's past. Ikin listened quietly as Ifeoma explained everything, Obina, Chidima's father, and John's blackmail. When she finished, Ikin was silent for a moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. We need to deal with John. He can't stay in this house if he's going to threaten our family. The next morning, Ikin confronted John. We know what you've been doing, Ikin said, his voice cold and firm. You will not blackmail anyone in this house, and you will not use Amora's past against her. John tried to play dumb. I don't know what you're talking about. Ikin stepped closer, his eyes blazing with anger. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You have two options, leave quietly, or I'll call the police. John's smug grin faltered. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, Ikin said, his voice deadly serious. You've crossed the line, and you're not welcome here anymore. John, realizing he had lost, backed down. Fine, he muttered. I'll leave. And with that, John slunk away, defeated. With John gone, a sense of relief settled over the household. Amora thanked Ifeoma and Ikin for standing by her side, grateful to have found such a supportive family. But there was still one last thing she needed to do. That evening, as the sun set, Amora sat with Chidima in the garden. Chidinma, she began softly, there's something I need to tell you. Something about your father. Chidinma looked up at her mother, her wide eyes full of curiosity. My father. Amora nodded. His name was Obina. He wasn't ready to be a father when I had you, so he left. But that doesn't mean you aren't loved. I've loved you enough for both of us, and I always will. Chidinma processed the information quietly before smiling up at her mother. It's okay, Mama. I don't need him. I have you. Amora hugged her daughter tightly, tears of love and relief streaming down her face. Yes, my love. You have me. In the weeks that followed, the family settled into a new routine. Uju, having learned from her mistakes, tried her best to befriend Chidinma, and their bond grew stronger each day. One afternoon, as the family gathered for dinner, Ifeoma looked around the table and smiled. Despite the challenges they had faced, they had come out stronger, together. Here's to family, Ikin said, raising his glass. Not the family we were born into, but the family we choose. Amora smiled, holding Chidinma's hand. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace.
I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, comment, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.